Xiesu Jilan Yushu, young talent. The only shortcoming is that he has a wife with a low status. Xiesu did not like me, thought I was vulgar, unfamiliar with literature, and even more disgusted with my attachment to power. After 4 years of marriage, he volunteered to be released for 3 years. On the day he returned to Beijing, he brought a piece of shoe brocade to the female relatives at home. Only there is no mine. At night, I loosened my clothes for the men and offered to leave. Xiesu said with a cold face, just because of this. I whispered, that's not all. 1. The man's body temperature still remained in the shirt in my hand, and I subconsciously squeezed it and repeated again, more than that. The candlelight made a crisp crackling sound and Xiesu's calm and scrutinizing gaze fell on my face. He is calm, and the youthful spirit of Tan Hualang walking around Chang'an Street has long been smoothed out in many years of release. Now he is even more calm, and I can't get close to him even more. The only constant is the alienation from me from beginning to end. The marriage contract between you and me is the life of my fathers. Xiesu's voice was very cold, even if he was stating the facts. 4 years ago, you came to the door with the marriage certificate to ask for marriage. An invisible embarrassment enveloped me, making me feel a little out of breath. I anxiously and unconsciously rubbed the coat in my hand, embroidered with floating clouds and wild cranes, and the delicate lines made my fingertips prick. Obviously, I picked up the lamp and embroidered it stitch by stitch. Or my face was too pale, and Xiesu sighed very lightly. At that time, there were only these 3 shoe brocade left in Yunxiu Pavilion, and I rushed back to Beijing in a hurry, not on purpose. Tomorrow I will ask Mo Yun to go to the warehouse to pick a high-quality Su embroidery for you. The brocade clothes are nothing more than something outside the body, don't be wronged anymore. I heard the accusations both overt and covert, and raised my eyes to look at him in a daze. In the past 3 years, I have taken care of the food in the house, and there are a few high-quality Su embroideries in the warehouse, and no one knows better than me. If I really love Nishang, why wait for him to open this golden mouth? The sour and mixed emotions blocked my throat, and I opened my mouth several times without making a sound. Xiesu's patience with me has long been exhausted, and he ended the topic, it's getting late, go to bed. 2. When the heavy curtain falls, the bed curtain becomes more private. The ups and downs of breathing, the male body, are all reminders of the existence of another person who shares the bed with me. My husband. A husband who asked to go out 3 months after getting married. The lights were dim, so quiet that even breathing could be heard. Xiesu suddenly got up halfway, and most of his body pressed against me. The strange and familiar incense invaded my senses, and there was a sharp pain. I suddenly remembered the sentence that the old lady said with a smile at the dinner that washed his dust today, you are 24, you should have a legitimate eldest son. The pain was so severe that I could hardly breathe, my heartbeat pounded my eardrums, but my eyes suddenly darkened. Xiesu blew out the hood lamp at the head of the bed. The men retreated, at a clear distance from before. The pain eased and I felt a long-lost sense of comfort. Then, a heavy emotion that I didn't know whether it was disappointment or happiness fell on my heart. In the dark, I laughed at myself silently. In the year he married Xiesu, he had just performed the coronation ceremony, and because of the sentence Jilan Yushu in the Golden Luan Hall, he was appointed as a flower lover by the emperor. I thought I could tie the knot with Qingmei, but I took a marriage certificate and went to Jinningbo's mansion. The marriage certificate was handwritten by Xie grandfather Jin Ningbo, stamped with the private seal of the head of the family, and there was also my father's life-saving grace. Xiesu was silent for 3 days, and finally bowed his head. The amazing Tan Hualang married a wife from the countryside. Therefore, Xiesu doesn't like me, I have always known it. I have always apologized. 3. When I got up at noon, there was a spring rain. Qingzhu dressed me up and Xiesu came back from practicing swordsmanship in the courtyard, with a little damp moisture and pear fragrance. I lowered my eyebrows and got up to change into his soaked coat. I have instructed the kitchen to prepare hot water. I said softly, the cold air is heavy in early spring, so it's better to pay more attention. No. Siesu refused simply, his eyes stayed on my shoulder for a moment, and his voice became a little colder. I'm getting together with my friends today, and I'm not coming back for dinner. I nodded, fastened my belt and took a step back, never looking at him, and not saying a few extra words. It's time, I'll go to the flower hall first. I don't care if he appreciates it or not, it's just my responsibility. The spring breeze was steep all the way to the flower hall, but it couldn't blow away my fatigue, and I yawned with my mouth half covered. As soon as the prince comes back, you don't even have time to sleep in. Qingzhu beside him complained in a low voice, you have stayed up several nights for that painting, and you haven't had a good rest. Silence, the prince is no more cautious after returning to the house than before. I tightened my shirt, and my movements suddenly stopped, and I instantly understood why Siesu's attitude suddenly became cold. This shirt was cut last spring, and it is half new. Siesu thought that I was wearing this old shirt on purpose, and I was angry that he didn't bring me that shoe brocade when he returned to Beijing yesterday. The familiar sourness rushed to the tip of my nose, and I blinked, feeling sorry for myself for knowing him so well for the first time. Turning around and walking to the flower hall, the sitting stewards quickly stood up, Madam. I suppressed my emotions and smiled, please sit down. The fragrance of tea was fragrant, and everyone reported to me in an orderly manner about the affairs of the house. This is a familiar rhythm to me, and my mind slowly stabilizes. At the end of the hearing, tea was reserved 3 times, and someone suddenly reported outside the hall, Mo Yun wants to see you. Mo Yun, Siesu's guard. 4. Mo Yun followed Siesu at the age of 7, and was released for 3 years. Siesu only brought him, so as soon as he came in, everyone hurriedly saluted. Mo Yun held the tray, and bowed to me neither humbly nor arrogantly. The prince ordered me to give this Su embroidery to my wife before going out. The flower hall, which had a fairly warm atmosphere, instantly cooled down. Yesterday's washing banquet was a matter of shoe brocade, and everyone in the mansion now knows about it. I can't thank you for your favor, and everyone in the house knows about it. Sending Mo Yun to deliver this batch of shoe embroidery seems to be an apology, and deeper, it is just a kind of admonition. Thank you for this trip. I said, thank you for my husband's kindness. Qingzhu took the tray, Mo Yun saluted and retreated, and the flower hall was silent like a cold cicada. Everyone wanted to say but stopped. In the past 4 years, I have done things fairly and taken care of them a lot, and most of them want to comfort me at this time. My bored chest felt a little lighter, and I smiled comfortingly, if it's okay, let's all get busy. The steward sighed and got up in 2s and 3s, but Uncle Chen on the left did not move. Uncle Chen has been in the Jinningbo mansion for many years, and the seniors have a high seniority, and all affairs outside the mansion should be handled by him. In the first year of marrying into the Jinningho mansion, I was in a difficult situation, with a low status, which could be called walking on thin ice. Siesu let Shuzhou go, and when I took over the feed, when I was stretched, it was all Chenbo who brought me up with one hand. I refilled him with tea, knowing that he had something important to talk to me alone. Your painting of a child playing with a dragonfly. Uncle Chen also sold Guanzi. It was auctioned in Shishan Pavilion, and was finally replaced by a scholar with a famous inkstone. I was shocked, and then I couldn't help but lower my head and chuckle. I thought my painting skills were just for self-entertainment in the deep boudoir. Don't belittle yourself. Uncle Chen smiled, there is good news. He paused and said, your exiled brother may be able to return to Beijing within half a year. The hot tea was knocked over by me unexpectedly. 5. The boiling water scalded my fingers to curl up, and Uncle Chen hurriedly got up and called someone, but I was in a trance. I was originally the daughter of a poor scholar. I lost my confidence when I was young, my father failed repeatedly, and my family was poor, but I was content. When he was 14 years old, Xia grandfather Jin Ningbo accidentally fell into the water while traveling in the mountains, and was rescued by my father, and the two hit it off at first sight. Once drunk, grandfather Xia brought paper and pen, and in a moment of excitement, he decided on the marriage of the Xia family's Chilina. After waking up, my father didn't dare to admit it, but 2 years later, Grandpa Xie drove west, and my father studied hard for many years all the way to the hospital examination, but he was unexpectedly involved in a fraud case that shocked the government and the opposition. His father died unjustly in prison 3 months later, his 14-year-old brother was exiled to the northwest, and his grandmother was seriously ill, and had no money to get medicine. In desperation, I took the marriage certificate, and went to Jinningbo's mansion. Tears fell on the tea table drop by drop, and I covered my mouth with a brocade handkerchief and suppressed the crying in my throat. With the kindness of the two families, the uncle's house will protect me and my grandmother, but it is not enough. In order to use the power of the Bofu to keep my brother, and even to let my brother return to Beijing in the future, I finally relied on the marriage certificate to let Xie Su marry me. The prince has been in correspondence with me for the past 3 years, and this is about it. Chenbo said, "If I don't tell you, I'm afraid that if things don't work, I'll make you happy in vain." I couldn't stop choking. This is Xie Su's consistent attitude towards me. Slap and give a sweet date. But this sweet date, I swallowed it happily with tears in my eyes. "Madam, the marriage contract between you and the prince has had a really bumpy start, and I know that you have suffered a lot of grievances in the past few years." Chenbo sighed lightly. After the prince returned to Beijing, his career rose step by step, and women only relied on their husbands and children in the world, and your future road will only become smoother and smoother. I wiped away my tears and smiled at Uncle Chen with tears in my eyelashes. I turned a deaf ear to his persuasion. 6. His emotions have been up and down several times, and his body is rarely a little tired when dealing with the affairs of the house. When she was serving dinner to the old lady in the evening, she saw that my face was not good and frowned and said, "What's wrong today? Sit down quickly." "I accept the thanks, sit down." The old lady has never been familiar with general affairs, and when I first entered the uncle's house, I didn't even know the account, so she handed me the feed. In the past 3 years when Xie Su was not in the house, the old lady drank tea and watched dramas, and she lived a comfortable life, and I just came to say hello every time I had a meal. "Sunqian is back, it's true that you take good care of your body." The old lady said, "Give me a big fat golden grandson as soon as possible." I lowered my eyes and said yes. There are a few children his age. The old lady sighed lightly. If it had been. Her words stopped, but I understood the unfinished meaning. If I had married Chulan at the beginning, I would have been afraid that both children would be good at this time. I can't answer. Chulan is the young daughter of the household minister, and Xie Su's childhood sweetheart. My position should indeed be hers. In the 3rd month of her marriage to Xie Su, Chulan got engaged, and Xie Su also volunteered to be released at that time. I went back to the main courtyard, and when I came out of the bath, Qingzhu asked, "Do you want to paint today? It's already the hour of high, and there are many daily affairs, and today is a little later than usual because I am not feeling well." "Draw it." I smiled. This is the only time I can have a leisure time every day. The painting room is located in the Ming Hall, and outside the window is a large pear tree in the courtyard. When grinding, I suddenly remembered that I had asked Xie Su if he could borrow his inner study. How did Xie Su answer in the first place? I started writing, and suddenly a gust of wind came, and the pear blossoms in the garden fluttered. The snow-white petals fell on the drawing paper, and I stared for a few seconds, thinking that if it were someone else, I would be content with my marriage. The daughter of the countryside married her uncle's mansion, her husband Jilan Yushu had a magnanimous career, and the Xie family had a clean family style, and she could only take a concubine if she had no children at 30. However, when I closed my eyes, the mixed and sour emotions in my chest surrounded me like a tide. Marriage is like a person drinking water, knowing whether it is cold or warm. The bead curtain sounded, and there was a sound of salute outside, and Qingzhu said, "The prince is back." 7. Xie Su drank wine and went to the bathroom to wash up. When I came out, I had already done most of my painting, and I was so focused that I accidentally noticed the shadow on the drawing paper, and then I suddenly looked up. Xie Su was wearing a moon-white shirt, with a slightly open placket, long hair untied, and water vapor falling from the ends of his hair, looking at my painting. I was shocked and was about to get up, but Siasu gently pressed my shoulder. The hot temperature in the man's palm came, and we both ate invisibly at the same time. Prince, I said, when will you return home? How long did you watch behind me? When did you learn to paint? Siasu avoided answering, stretched out his hand and took the drawing paper and looked at it for a long time, and commented, the intensity is appropriate and the charm is long. When you first got married, the words you picked up the pen were unsightly, and you couldn't even understand the accounts. Siasu raised his eyes to look at me, and his usual cold voice softened a lot. Now that I have this painting skill, I think you must have worked hard after I left home. It was as if it had been pricked by a subtle needle, and the sharp pain was fleeting. I really have no talent for scriptures and poems, but when I was a child, I picked up a pen and started painting, from my father to the county private schoolmaster to my grandfather Sia, who had already passed away. Everyone praised me for my aura in painting. I can paint myself, not after marriage. But aren't I used to it? I smiled slightly, lowered my eyes, and said no more. Siasu admired it for a while, and praised it a few times, as if he remembered something. Why don't you go to the study to paint? The second half of the words gradually faded, and he already remembered, why didn't I go to the study? The wind blew outside the window wall, and the pear blossoms flew. Siasu sat leisurely opposite me, just like the spring night of the wedding year. It was also a spring night like today, and I carefully asked if I could borrow his inner study, but Siasu suddenly turned cold. 8. Siasu was born in a family of bells and dings, and his etiquette and upbringing were smoked into his bones, and if he was angry, he would not lose his temper. Only a colder tone, a more alienated attitude. Just like after I proposed to borrow the inner study, he was indifferent for several days. A vulgar person who was born in the countryside, and couldn't even write words, is really worthy of today's Tanhualang's inner study. That day was my fault. I looked up in surprise, but I saw Siasu sitting upright and looking at me. I was young and frivolous at that time, my temperament was floating, and I was angry with you. Madam, forgive me. Siasu poured tea for me and said gently, go to the inner study from now on, and I will ask Mo Yun to buy painting supplies for you tomorrow. No need. I looked at the tea and thought to myself, this should be the first time we have such a peaceful and equal communication after marriage. It's just a pity it's too late. I smiled at Siasu, facing the century-old pear tree in the courtyard here. The spring scenery is just right, and I should be in a better mood when painting here. You are the wife of the crown prince, who dares to give you unhappiness? Siasu said again, do you like the Su embroidery sent today? The color of that batch of Su embroidery was too bright, and Mo Yun sent it into the warehouse again, and I haven't seen it yet. I like it. I drank tea and said softly, thank you, Prince. Call me Qingjuan. Siasu said yesterday's words again, genie and splendid clothes are nothing but things outside the body, and you should understand this truth when you paint and cultivate your sentiments. I wanted to laugh a little. I never thought about being angry with him, let alone the shoe brocade that lacked me. However, I lowered my eyebrows and said yes. No need to defend, I'm used to it. It's a painted spring night pear tree. Siasu asked, can this painting be named? I stared at the painting and said, a snow tree. Siasu pondered for a moment and suddenly smiled, good name. Sleep well. He stood up, madam, I asked for this painting with a cheeky face. Before going to bed, Qingju let down his hair for me and muttered in a low voice, really, a painting of yours sells for 100 taels in Shishan Pavilion, it's really cheap for the prince. I laughed dumbly and suddenly there was a pause when I walked to the bed. Most of the candles in the inner room were extinguished, and it was dim, with incense and hazy. I already know what to expect. 9. When I was hugged by Siasu and kissed, my whole body trembled finely, and he seemed puzzled, but the kiss and touch were a little gentler. The incense was light, the breath blended, and the gap between the lips and teeth intertwined, and I wandered out and couldn't control my wedding night. The eyes were full of red, the intoxicating smell of alcohol, the man's body, and the indifference that almost cut me. The only memory left for me on my wedding night was pain. The Xie family has a clean family style. Xiesu is devoted to the imperial examination, and the inner courtyard is clear before marriage, not to mention that he has no pity for me. There was no glass of wine, no wedding ceremony, not even a word. The red candle curtain is warm, but the atmosphere is stagnant, rampage, and gasping with nakedness and venting. What are you thinking? Xiesu lifted the long hair around my neck and pulled me back to reality, and he whispered, "Let's have a child." I didn't answer but remembered that this was the third time in the bed, plus the wedding night. In the second half of the night, I was in a trance, only to know that there was a burst of rain, and when I got up, the rain had just stopped, and the spring breeze was damp and cold. The bed was soft and warm, Xiesu's underwear was wide open, his hands were on my waist, and he fell asleep sideways, and his chest rose and fell steadily with his breathing. I looked at it for a long time and thought, it turns out that this matter doesn't hurt. I carefully removed Xiesu's arm, but my legs went soft uncontrollably when I got out of bed. The people who served in the main courtyard already knew the movement of the water call last night, and everyone had a smile on their faces, and Xingju complained a little when she was dressing me. Why doesn't Madam sleep more? The stewards of the flower hall are waiting. I helped the hairpin and said softly, the pear blossoms in the uncle's house are about to bloom, and the old lady is going to hold a flower viewing banquet, so she has to be busy. After being in charge of the feed for 4 years, from being stretched to now at ease, I have a tacit understanding with the stewards, and after listening to the incident, I went to the old lady's yard. After inviting the old lady to prepare meals, I reported on the affairs of the house, and the old lady was a little impatient. You just need to be clear, you know, I have never loved these ordinary affairs. It's a flower viewing banquet, you have to organize it for me. The old lady said, stop making jokes about the first year. I said yes. Speak up. The old lady looked at the pear tree in the courtyard outside the window and sighed, it's been 4 years. I looked at the old lady, and her demeanor made me understand that she had forgotten the agreement made 4 years ago. 10. When he returned to the main courtyard after his busy work, it was already dark, and the lights were lit in the bright room, and Xiesu sat leisurely on the terrace. When he saw me coming, he closed the book in his hand, and I realized that it was my picture book. Thank you for your hard work. My mother was spoiled before she got married, and my grandmother worked hard for everything after she got married. Xiesu poured tea for me. She doesn't know about general affairs, so I'm bothering you. I should have done it. I shook my head, sat down, and my eyes fell on the picture book in his arms. You love to draw pear trees. Xiesu said, your painting is very agile, but the content is too limited. I lowered my eyes and thought, that's because I only have the world of the uncle's mansion. I also painted a lot of rural scenes in the early stage. Xiesu paused but still asked, why don't you paint? Because the more I paint, the more I miss it and I can't get it, which only adds to the sentimentality. I couldn't answer and the atmosphere was quiet for a moment. Xiesu put down the picture book and said gently, tomorrow my friend will visit, and I will trouble my wife again. I can answer this, smile, yes. Xiesu's friend is the eldest son of the Jinshi of the same year as him, and the Minister of Rights. At the same time, he is also Chu Lan's brother. The guests were selected under the century-old pear tree in the atrium, and the two drank and danced swords, needles and needles on current affairs, and were happy. When I first met, I bowed and retreated consciously. Uncle Chen sent pear wine, saying that it was the wine necessary for young Master Chu to come over in the past. I was about to go to the accounting room, and I stopped by the atrium, so I sent it to the area. When he reached the corner of the atrium corridor, he suddenly heard young Master Chu say, this marriage is still wrong to you. I paused and Xiesu spoke. The marriage certificate grandfather stamped the seal of the head of the family, and he should keep his promise. Young Master Chu snorted, after you return to Beijing, your career will rise step by step, and your wife's status cannot provide you much help. Xiesu said, a man walks in the world and stands on himself. Yes. Young Master Chu smiled and said, I'm not as open-minded as you. 11. I took a deep breath. The wine I was carrying seemed to weigh 1,000 pounds, and I was about to leave silently, but young Master Chu sighed suddenly. Lana married into the public house, but her life is rich and happy, but she often complains to me that her husband is a warrior, not to mention the romance and snow, and he can't even talk about poetry and songs. The young master of Chu was sad, if it was. At the beginning. He did not say the second half of the sentence, and Siesu was silent, only to hear the pear blossoms rustling in the wind. The blank part of Siesu embarrassed me, and the root of my tongue was bitter, bitter to the point of sourness, like shame and pain. What about you, Tan Hualang? Young Master Chu smiled, with a bit of irony. What is your wife born in the countryside talking about with you? Although she came from a humble background, she is very aura. The wind passed, bringing up a large number of flying white pears, and Siesu's words were hidden in the wind. It's just that the character is slightly flawed, and women love vanity, but if they are carved well, it is also a piece of beautiful jade. I don't remember who sent the jar of pear blossom wine to in the end. I only remember that day, my ears were buzzing, my mind was in a trance, and the tip of my throat and nose were so sore that they were almost sharp. I returned to the main courtyard, and as always, I lit the lamp and looked at the ledger. The fragrance of tea overflowed, the incense floated, as if it were the same as before. It's just that when Xingzhu came to cut the lamp for me, he suddenly paused and said in fear, "Madam, why are you crying?" I touched my face like waking up from a dream, and there was a cold water. The large area of snow white outside the window wall. This was a quiet spring night, just like when Siesu was released to Shuzhou. I've been doing this for 4 years. But I couldn't help it. This uncle's mansion had already choked my throat, and I was about to be eaten away, and I was almost out of breath. "Qingzhu," I whispered, "go and get the box that I gave you." Siesu returned to the main courtyard 2 hours later, with a light smell of alcohol, and was a little surprised to see me sitting in the bright room. "Why haven't you rested, husband?" I pushed the document in front of me over, looked at his handsome face, and said, "Let's leave." 12. The old lady had signed the divorce letter 4 years ago, and she had this power. And my name, which was written half an hour ago, was printed with a bright red handprint and the correct word Shunli. Since I married into my uncle's house, no one has called my name anymore. Siesu and I sat across from the table, and the leisure at home in the past 2 days had disappeared, and he changed back to my more familiar appearance at this moment. Alienation was sharp, coercive and unabashed, and his voice was extremely calm. "When was this book written with a letter of leave?" 4 years ago, when I married into the uncle's house. I sat up straight and looked him in the eye for the first time. I took the initiative to ask the old lady. It was indeed me who came to the door with my uncle's marriage certificate, and I was desperate at that time. I paused before saying, "But it is also true that I ruined your marriage with Miss Chu, and I am extremely guilty in order to repay your kindness. My grandfather's marriage contract is a fact, Miss Chu, and I only made a verbal agreement. How can we ruin my marriage?" Siesu's jaw tightened. "Your father saved my grandfather as a great favor, and I also admitted this marriage myself. No one forced me. Why do you need to feel guilty?" I looked up at him suddenly. "So why did you ask to go out after getting married?" A belated grievance almost overwhelmed me, and I blinked before I realized that my eyes were blurry. "Since it is voluntary, why has it been so indifferent all these years? And why do you have such a deep prejudice against me?" But I choked up, almost murmuring, "I'm so tired." Siesu froze and looked at me in a daze. I burst into tears, called out his words for the first time, and repeated, "Sungjin, I'm so tired." The affairs of the government are indeed complicated. Siesu was a little at a loss, handed me a brocade handkerchief, and said softly, "My mother is overwhelmed. You are really hard. Tomorrow, I will ask Mo Yun to bring you a few grandmothers to help." Tears finally fell, and a familiar powerlessness grabbed my heart. "But it's still because of that shoe brocade." Siesu hurriedly said, "I will write a letter to my friends in Shuzhou immediately, and I will send it to my uncle's mansion within half a month." I finally fell into the whirlpool of powerlessness. "No." I shook my head, tears on my face not dry, but I didn't want to wipe it anymore. Husband, after you return to Beijing, your career will be smooth, and you should find good in-laws to help the court. I took a deep breath, saluted him, and said gently and firmly, if my husband does not want to divorce, I will ask to leave the hall. The candlelight jumped, so quiet that only the sound of breathing could be heard. Siesu stared at me for a long time, got up and threw his sleeves away. 13. As soon as the words were spoken, the heavy stone pressing on his heart seemed to be a little lighter. I gathered all the people who served inside and outside the main courtyard, and announced the news gently. Everyone was dazed and panicked, and Qingzhu was even more anxious to shed tears. The moonlight tonight is just right, cold and bright, and I look at the bright moon, and have no intention of comforting. I just suddenly realized that after living in the uncle's mansion for 4 years, this was the first time I smelled the light fragrance of pears. Half an hour later, the old lady called me to her yard. Siesu stood tall and jade, standing in front of the window with his hands behind his back. When Cheng Jun mentioned it, I remembered that I was drawing and leaving the book. The old lady stroked her chest. I did not like you at that time, but in the past few years, although you have not said that you have many regulations, you have done your best. How can you? Why are you going to leave? The old lady slapped the table. My son is also back. Where are you dissatisfied with this day? I looked at the window. Siesu remained calm. I sighed. It's not that I'm dissatisfied. My husband is already a dragon and a phoenix, and I am high. The old lady's face slowed down. Since it is a high climb, it is best to leave according to the original agreement. I said, my husband will have a smooth career after returning to Beijing, and he is young and promising, so why not continue to support him by marriage? The old lady's face softened a lot. Furthermore, who in the capital does not look forward to the Xie family marrying a noble daughter back, raised in a high school since childhood, and will be 100 times better than me in terms of feeding and taking care of it? I smiled. You don't need to bother like you now, you can live your own leisurely life as usual. The old lady's anger had subsided, but she was still a little hesitant, and was about to speak, but she heard Siesu say coldly, please avoid it for the time being, mother. The old lady went out. Siesu turned around and sat opposite me. His face was calm, but the pressure of not being angry and self-deprecating came to his face. How will you stand on your own after leaving? In today's world, women rely on their fathers before marriage, and rely on their husbands after marriage. This dynasty has been considered open and inclusive, but women are still rare. When the old lady first drew the letter of signing and divorcing, she had promised to establish a female household for me. I looked at Siesu frankly. I don't need you to give any compensation or silver. My paintings have been quite famous in recent years, and most of my paintings are auctioned at Shishan Pavilion. Siesu looked up suddenly, but the hand on the table was silently clenched. Although my grandmother is old, she is still in good health, and there is a small courtyard in the suburbs. My voice softened a little. She doesn't have much time. I want to accompany her. It was my omission. Siesu's voice was hoarse. I should have brought my grandmother into the house earlier. My grandmother lived in the countryside for most of her life. I said, she doesn't want to come. The way out is so thoughtful. Siesu looked at me and asked word by word, you already had the intention of reconciliation, didn't you? I smiled, yes. 14. On the day I left the Beau mansion, all the pear blossoms in the courtyard were open, like a large patch of white snow. There are many affairs in the mansion. Siesu and I sat in the main seat, and the flower hall was full of big and small stewards inside and outside the house. Since it is leaving, it is always necessary to do a good job in handovers, and the old lady is in charge of the feedback, so Siesu must have a general understanding. In the 4 years of the Beau mansion, there are regulations on the promotion and punishment of various places, and I have regulations on the operation and circulation, and within half an hour, the regulations have been sorted out. Siesu was speechless at the beginning, and finally he was speechless, and after a long time, he put down the teacup and whispered, Madam does everything in every way. He paused and said in a hoarse voice, you have worked hard all these years. After I leave, the rules and regulations will follow the old rules. I turned a deaf ear to his words and lined up the stack of ledgers handed by Uncle Chen. The most important thing is the general ledger of these years. After the wedding in March, Siesu went to Shuzhou, and I was powerless in the entire Bofu, and the servants were the best at looking at the situation, and I suffered a lot of losses on the account throughout the year. If you eat too much and you will be dizzy under the oil lamp and look at the account book late at night, you will be able to practice perfectly. Every place, every expenditure is clean and transparent. After the 3 major books, Chenbo sighed, Madam is the most upright and frank in doing things, and she has never made a mistake in the past 3 years. Siesu's hand holding the teacup shook for no reason. In the 4th book, I was about to open it, but Siesu suddenly grabbed my wrist, very lightly, as if he was afraid of scaring me. No need to check. He repeated in a low voice, no need to check. No. I looked at him, with an imperceptible tremor in my voice. I have to let you know if I really love vanity and flaws in character. Siesu let go of my wrist as if he was burned, and for the first time, when he looked at me, he took the lead in looking away. The flower hall was silent. I stared past everyone in the hall and smiled. Thank you for your care in the past 4 years. Chenbo suddenly turned his face away, and everyone was either jealous or bowed their heads, and was reluctant to spread in silence. I looked at Siesu and solemnly poured him a cup of tea, replacing the wine with tea. The prince is benevolent, he has worked for my brother over the years, and I will never forget the great kindness. Siesu's lips moved. This is what I should have done. I smiled, got up and saluted him. That letter of divorce, please hand it over to the government and stamp it with a red seal. 15. Without waiting for Siesu to reply, I turned around and left. Walking through the flower hall and through the atrium, the steps are light, and the century-old pear tree is falling, as if it is retaining, and it is like a farewell full of blessings. My rented carriage was waiting outside the side door, and I was stepping on the last step with my skirt up, when I heard a childish "ma'am" behind me. I turned around, and the corridors on both sides of the foyer were full of servants of the uncle's mansion, staring at me reluctantly, and the old lady and Siesu were standing in front of the farthest hall. In front of me, half of the big and small knelt down to me with a plop and simply kowtowed 3 times. I was a little surprised and was about to help him up, but I saw the little servant say, 2 years ago, my mother was seriously ill and had no money to get medicine, so it was my wife who asked Miss Qingzhu to send me silvertails in private. I was stunned for a moment and suddenly remembered that I caught this memory from the depths. My mother's life was saved by my wife. Most of this house has been taken care of by you. You have sympathy for us, we all know. He sniffed. I can't read, I can't say anything, I just hope you have a good life in the future. I helped him up. He was adopted by Uncle Chen half a year ago, and if he was reckless today, the old lady would not punish him too much for Uncle Chen's face. Therefore he dared to kowtow to me on behalf of everyone in the uncle's mansion today. In the future, ask Uncle Chen to teach you how to recognize a few words. There was a little wetness in my eyes, and I blinked before squeezing out a voice. I understand your intentions. In the future, you will help me take care of Qingzhu more. I looked up and saw the red-eyed Qingzhu hiding behind the column in the corridor on the right. She is a silly girl, but unfortunately she is in the uncle's mansion, and I can't take her away. I finally moved my gaze to the front of the hall. The distance was too far for me to see the expression on Siesu's face clearly. But it doesn't matter, when have I seen his face clearly in the past 4 years? I got into the carriage, the wheels rolled, and I sat for a long time before I realized that I had walked out of the uncle's mansion like a dream. Lifting the curtain and walking through the busy city of fireworks in the world, the number of people is gradually decreasing, but the birdsong is gradually clear, and a large area of farmland that I am familiar with appears on the country road. At the hour of a stick of incense, the carriage stopped and appeared in the small courtyard at the end of the road, clean and simple. The wooden door is half closed, and the chickens and ducks peck at corn, a leisurely style. As I got closer, I saw an old woman standing on the side of the road, full of smiles. Grandmother. I jumped out of the carriage and strode towards her, just like I did when I was a child, and threw myself into her arms. In the distance, in the deep forest, the shadow of the bird swept past the crown shadow, flapping its wings and submerging into the sea of trees. The weary birds have returned to the forest. 16. The small courtyard is simple, and the stone steps are decorated with green marks that cannot be cleaned, which is not as good as the uncle's mansion with green tiles and vermilion roofs. However, there is a huge study with bright windows. Occupying most of the bright room in the main hall, a large mahogany case is placed horizontally, bamboo bookshelves are placed on both sides, and a few bouquets of wildflowers are inserted between the clay pots on the table, which is quite interesting. This big case was called by the carpenter at the head of the village. He is good at his craftsmanship, and he has been fighting for more than half a year. Grandmother didn't ask any more questions, walked over and set up the window. Outside the window, pear trees are planted. Different from the thickness of the century-old pear tree in the Beau mansion, it has only been planted for 3 or 4 years, but it has also bloomed a large area of white as snow. The year you entered the uncle's mansion, I was just sick, and I was able to go to the ground, so I planted this pear. My grandmother looked at me with a smile. Now, this pear tree has also waited for my pear mother. The tip of my nose was sore, tears fell, and I stepped forward to hug her, grandmother. That night, cicadas chirped everywhere, fireflies flew, stars and moon were shining, and my grandmother and I had dinner in front of the courtyard. Coarse tea and light rice, but very delicious. While drinking the fish soup, I said, "Tomorrow I will go to the stream to catch some fish. This season, the fish is the most delicious." Grandmother smiled and asked, "Can you remember how to fish?" "I remember." I blinked and said softly, "Tomorrow I will let you see your granddaughter's ability." The conditions in the countryside are simple, and life is uncomfortable, but it makes me feel relaxed and comfortable. There is no need to think about it every day. Sometimes I sleep until the sun rises, and sometimes I stay up late to paint until late at night. Occasionally, when I think of the life of the uncle's house, there will always be a little unreal, like a dream. I had a lot of time to paint and started reading Shido Mountains and Lakes. The content of my paintings is no longer limited to the pear tree. One day when the sky was clear and clear, I carried an easel back to the small courtyard from the lake, carrying a few yellow crabs in my hand, thinking about whether to steam or stir-fry, but I saw a luxurious carriage in front of the door. I stopped and Qingju seemed to feel something towards me, and said in surprise, "Madam." In the distance, Siesu was dressed in a light blue robe, embroidered with floating clouds and wild cranes, with a silver belt at his waist, and a tall body, with a clear and calm demeanor. The man looked at me gently, as if he was expecting something. The smile on my face gradually subsided, and I said politely, "Thank you, Lord." That little expectation instantly dimmed. 17. Siesu solemnly saluted my grandmother, and said with great guilt that it was the grandson-in-law's dereliction of duty not to take her into the uncle's house. The grandmother's attitude was normal, neither warm nor cold, and she smiled and returned the salute. "This is a wild tea tree in the mountains." I received Siesu in the courtyard and handed over the teacup. "Thank you, Master Sie." Siesu took it calmly, tasted it lightly, and said, "It also has a different flavor." "I don't agree." "Look, Bieber Mansion once." His eyes fell on my face and paused, "much healthier." I suddenly laughed, laughing so much that I couldn't hold the teacup. Siesu was stunned, looking at me as if he knew me for the first time. For most of the past half-month, I have been wandering in the mountains and fields, often carrying an easel on my back to look for scenery, and my skin has tanned a little, and it is difficult for Siesu to say it so euphemistically. He put down the teacup, a little at a loss, as if remembering something, turned around and ordered Qingju to bring a brocade box. "This is shoe brocade from Shuzhou." Siesu opened the brocade box with his own hands and said softly, "It's a new product of Yunxiu Pavilion this year. Can you see if you like it?" I took a look and said straight to the point, "I never cared about the missing shoe brocade." Siesu shook hands and looked down at the brocade box, not looking at me. I wore old clothes that day, but I didn't like the new clothes cut by the uncle's house according to the regulations. I smiled. I have always disliked clothes that are too flashy. I actually guessed it. Siesu closed the brocade box and suddenly said, "The flower viewing banquet held by the uncle's mansion a few days ago, the guests all said that they were not as thorough as you were in charge of it. Mother, she misses you very much. Siesu took a deep breath and looked up at me. The stewards always say that the general affairs in the house are not as good as in the past. I took a sip of tea but said something else. 3 months after the wedding, you asked to go out, and that was the first time I managed the flower viewing banquet of the uncle's mansion. That banquet was a mess. I laughed, I made a lot of jokes, I can't tell the distance between the guests, and I don't know how the husband of the female relative in the inner courtyard has a personal relationship with you. I came from a humble background, no one taught me the rules, and as soon as my husband left, my mother-in-law didn't know about the affairs. I looked at him and whispered, I'm alone and helpless, and I don't even have anyone to ask. Siesu's eyelashes trembled, and his breathing turned heavily away from his face. Lord Sie, you don't know how everyone in the mansion openly disobeyed the prince's wife who fell out of favor in the first year. I sighed, I wasn't born to do it so well. The atmosphere fell into a stagnation, and only vague birdsong was heard. You and I have signed the letter of divorce, and I hope that Lord Sie will send it to the government as soon as possible. I got up, thank you, I won't send you off. 18. After sending Siesu away, I thought that my life would return to peace, but he would visit me in the future, as long as it coincided with the holiday. Visitors must bring gifts, not gold, silver, brocade, but firewood, rice, oil and salt, poetry, and painting collections. Even when I refused, he acted in moderation after all, he was in the middle of the 20-year, and he was released as an official for 3 years, and the people were well trained. It all depends on whether he is happy or not, and he was so indifferent to me in the past, but I am not worth bothering about. But putting aside the entanglements of the past and putting down his figure, Siesu is indeed erudite and a good teacher. He is serious about studying and has many years of experience, and he always gives me a lot of inspiration when chatting. On a warm spring afternoon, he came from the city from a vacation, and when he met me painting by the stream on the way, he helped me carry the easel all the way back to the courtyard. Grandmother fetched mountain spring water and made tea to refresh his heart. He drank tea, and suddenly said, Li Nyong, can you give me another chance, can I go back to my uncle's house? I didn't answer, calmly drank the tea at the bottom of the bowl, and then said, Master Sie, please come with me. I took Siesu into the inner courtyard and pushed open the door of my study. The pear blossoms outside the window have passed their strongest flowering period, falling all over the ground and falling all over my study with the wind. The study is full of paintings, and the fragrance of ink comes from the nose. Thank you, if you are in the uncle's house. I looked at him, I don't have such a study. Siesu's face flashed with annoyance, and he was about to say something, but I interrupted. I don't have any free time to paint for me. He fell silent suddenly. In the past few years since I married you, I do feel aggrieved sometimes. I stared at my painting, but it's normal for you to hold a grudge against me, but in the end, it's really my fault. No, it's my fault, I hurt you too deeply when I was young and frivolous. Siesu stood in front of the door and laughed at himself, in vain. I have read the books of the sages for many years. I laughed too, reached out and stroked the painting, and said softly, I was in so much pain on the wedding night, it hurt me so much that I was terrified of the bed. Siesu suddenly blushed, and his neck was steaming, and he was so ashamed that he couldn't even speak. I'm really sorry, I'm a rough person. I raised my eyebrows and looked at him. Later, you were sent home, and you were very gentle that day. I remember many embarrassing and aggrieved moments, and I remember when you were sent out, I used all my courage to ask if I could go with you. In exchange for Siesu's cold reprimand, merciless, every word was like a knife. But these will pass. I looked at Siesu's regretful face. I rarely think of these emotions since I left. I don't want to go back to my uncle's mansion because the high-ranking lady is not the life I want. I am lazy, and I was born in the countryside, so I am not used to it. During those 4 years in the Earl mansion, I was in charge of the central feeding system, and almost made me breathless. Thank you, sir. I pointed to the paintings all over the room and said with a smile, look, the content of my paintings now is not only the pear tree. 19. The first time Siasu hurried back without waiting for the city to close when he was resting, he had a bit of a sense of fleeing for no reason. My days were calm again. He drank and brewed tea, read poetry and painted, and occasionally entertained several women who were auctioning paintings at Shishan Pavilion. Qingzhu would visit me every 10 days, and I was able to learn a lot about the current situation from her. For example, the accounts in the house have become unclear since I left. For example, Siasu suddenly moved his living to the cold lotus garden in the backyard, and also repaired a huge study room that connects east and west. For another example, the old lady was looking at the noble women in Beijing to Siasu recently, but she was all rejected by Siasu. I forgot that there were too many interesting things in the mountains and fields every day, and the window looked out the window, and the boundlessness, and many things could no longer stay in my heart. When the pear blossoms were all finished and began to bear fruit, Siasu visited my mountain courtyard. It was early summer, the drizzle was endless, and the peaks in the distance were dyed into an empty ink like smoke and mist. Siasu knocked on the door of my courtyard in a raincoat and straw hat. I opened the door with an oil paper umbrella, and I was very surprised to see him coming in the rain. He smiled gently at me, and then turned sideways and gave way to the person behind me. A 17 or 18-year-old boy with dark skin, half of his ears cut off, and a face covered with hideous scars, branded with tattoos. The young man's blind half of his eyes was filled with tears, and he smiled at me with his teeth. "Sister." The umbrella in my hand rolled to the ground, and I threw myself into the boy's arms, crying sadly and trembling so much that I could hardly speak. The grandmother walked out anxiously, and when she saw this scene, she froze in place. Brother Heng patted me on the back, then walked a few steps to the bottom of the steps where my grandmother was standing, knelt down and kowtowed 3 times, "Grandmother, the unfilial grandson is back." The grandmother screamed, staggered to the door and cried, "My son." The drizzle became heavier, and it calmed down after some crying, and I quickly boiled hot water to wipe the cold air from everyone. My grandmother and Brother Heng were talking softly, and Siasu's robe was half wet, and they were happily looking at my paintings in the study. I walked in and closed the door and bowed to Siasu. Siasu was shocked and quickly helped me up, with a little anger. "Why are you always so polite to me?" I was silent for a long time and said, "Thank you, I thank you for your efforts, but we have already reconciled. Your father is a great favor to save my grandfather." Siasu trembled in his voice. "Besides, I owe you a lot, and I just want to make up for it as much as I can." 20. Silence permeated again, and the entanglement between me and him was always unclear. I sighed, walked to the bookshelf and handed him a wooden box. "This is what I have earned from selling paintings over the years, and it is still a little short of 1,000 taels. Siasu looked at me in disbelief. The old ginseng that hung my grandmother's life was worth 1,000 taels. I said softly, "You opened the warehouse for me." This time Brother Heng was able to return to Beijing. "You must have dredged many connections, and I really can't repay your kindness. This silver should be collected and given to you." I turned my head away, not daring to look at him. "Now you take it first, my painting is still in good stock now, and I will definitely return it 100 times in the future." Siasu's chest rose and fell violently, the veins on his neck were bulging, and he said in a dumb voice, "You know that what I want is not this. I like you." He walked in and held my wrist, the fresh moisture and incense hit his face. Siasu pressed me between his chest and the bookshelf, and whispered, "My eyes are clumsy and stupid, and I mistakenly took pearls for fish. Lin Yong, can you give me a chance?" Siasu's tone was soft. "I will remarry you and move to the cold lotus garden, where there are north and south study rooms. In summer, we gamble on tea and splash ink, and in winter, we talk around the stove at night. If you don't like ordinary affairs, I will transfer to the emperor as governor, and we will travel together, and the scenery in the picture will be all over the country." He looked at me intently, his handsome eyebrows and eyes were particularly gentle at this moment. "We took my grandmother and Brother Heng back to my uncle's mansion and gave birth to a child. You taught her to paint, I taught her poetry, and we can walk hand in hand every year." My breath blended, and I raised my eyes and crashed into his dark eyes, full of anticipation and a little longing. For a moment, I heard the restlessness of my heartbeat, the time of life paused at this moment, and I really felt the heartbeat. However, I remember the birds fluttering their wings, and not entering the canopy on the day I came home, and I was so excited. The bofu can't see this kind of bird. Power comes with responsibility. I lowered my eyes and whispered, Sungjin, I am very selfish. I want to be a free bird in the mountains and fields. I can't take responsibility. Siasu's thick eyelashes trembled slightly. I said, I don't want to. The rain stopped outside the window, and Siasu's back was a little bleak, and I watched him go away. 21. Grandmother fell ill. I already had a premonition in my heart. My grandmother was even more open-minded, and she and I were very calm. Those 1,002 people participated in extending my grandmother's life for 4 years, and in the past few years, they have been supported by waiting for me and Brother Heng to come home. Now that Brother Heng and I are back, my grandmother can't hold on any longer. She has been sleeping for a long time, and the doctor has invited more than one, and everyone who comes shook their heads. After hearing the news, Siasu came to the door again after a month, bringing the retired imperial physician from the palace. The imperial doctor took the pulse, pondered for a long time, and prescribed a prescription. I sent him and Siasu out of the small courtyard, and the old imperial doctor said bluntly, It's just these 2 months. My heart sank, and Brother Heng sent silver taels to the old imperial doctor behind me. I looked at Siasu and smiled bitterly. I'm sorry to trouble you again. You know what I don't like the most is such a clear attitude. Siasu looked at me for a long time, as if he wanted to say something but finally swallowed it. After that, Siasu would visit every 3 days, and his attitude returned to the polite and courteous manners at the beginning, but more gentle than at the beginning. I refused many times, either tough or soft, but he resolved it with the most peaceful attitude. During the last rain at the end of summer, the fruits of the pear trees outside the window fell all over the tree, and my grandmother, who had been lying in bed for a long time, suddenly got out of bed. She was refreshed, sat in front of the steps, waved to Siasu in the courtyard, and said lovingly, Sia family boy, come here. Siasu walked quickly and half squatted beside her. It's really handsome. Grandmother touched his face and smiled, You are a good gentleman. 4 years ago, her father died unjustly in prison. Brother Heng's life and death were uncertain. I was bedridden, and the doctor said that if he wanted to hang my old life, he had to take root ginseng. My grandmother said in a long tone, 1,000 taels of old ginseng is no different from killing me. My granddaughter cried in front of my bed, begging me to stay with her again. My pear girl was desperate in the end, so she begged for her uncle's house. Brother Heng and I turned our faces away. Siasu seemed to have a premonition of what she was going to say, and shook his head hurriedly. My grandmother smiled and said, It's our fault to repay the favor, and I really feel guilty. Sometimes I want to leave, but I can't let go of my granddaughter. She suffered too much and I promised to accompany her, but she said very little to the uncle's house. We did something wrong. How dare we go to the uncle's mansion to meet her? No, no. Siasu squeezed out his voice. It is the grandson-in-law who is unfilial, and he should have taken you into the house earlier. I didn't blame you, thank you. Jining Bofu is benevolent, you are a gentleman, but life is so wrong. The old ginseng hung my life for 4 years, but it also made me and Lin Yong separate for 4 years before we were reunited. Grandmother's voice was gentle, Your marriage is like this, it backfired. You are husband and wife, but the relationship is shallow, and the fate is weak, and there is no fate. Grandmother touched his head and said softly, Life is a sea, let's let each other go. Siasu lowered his head, his shoulders shook, and tears dripped silently. The wind picked up. Grandmother looked at the pear trees in the courtyard and said with a smile, It's a pity that I couldn't eat this year's pears. 23. The last time I saw Siasu was in early autumn, when the pears were ripe. Brother Heng and I finished my grandmother's funeral. The carriage arrived at the long pavilion outside the city, and Brother Heng, who was driving, pulled the reins and said, Sister, it is Master Sia in the pavilion in front of you. I lifted the curtain and dismounted, and Siasu stood with his hands behind his back in the pavilion, dressed in a brocade robe, a silver belt at his waist, embroidered with dark patterns of floating clouds and wild cranes, and a gentleman-like jade. The dark patterns of floating clouds and wild cranes in his robe were embroidered by me myself. There was hot tea in the pavilion, and I sat opposite him at the table. Siesu poured tea for me and asked with a smile, "Where are you going this time?" I lowered my head to drink tea. The fragrance of orchids was fragrant, and I said, "Shujo." The atmosphere was silent for a while, and after a while, Siesu said, "Shujo, the fertile fields are thousands of miles, the land of Tianfu, it is a good place." I smiled at him. "Pear girl." Siesu lowered his head, his voice deep and slow. "Sometimes, I always wake up in the middle of the night, regretting and painful. I always think, if only I had been gentler to you on the wedding night, if only I had taken you with me when you begged to be with me." Siesu laughed at himself. "You are so beautiful, if I let go of my prejudices, wouldn't it end like today?" The ups and downs of breathing, the male body, are all reminders of the existence of another person who shares the bed with me. Yes. Siesu smiled, "Birds will always fly high." He stood up, replaced the wine with tea, and said gently, "This is 1,000 miles away, take good care of yourself." I drank with him. "The ends of the world are neighbors, I hope you will cherish them." The carriage rolled again, and I finally looked out the window. Siesu's figure gradually became smaller, and the city gate disappeared from my sight. Looking up, the sky is high and the sun is bright, and the autumn breeze is cool. The sparrows have already flown south. Postscript. Moderator, hello everyone, welcome to our column, Painting a Millennium. Today we invited Professor Yu from Yenching University to walk into the world of Shen Li's paintings with us again. Professor, they are all old friends, so I won't introduce them too much. Moderator, Professor Yu, I heard that the newly unearthed A Tree of Snow has been confirmed to be Shen Li's real work. Professor, after the collaboration of multidisciplinary experts and the synthesis of various evidence, although this pear blossom painting does not have an inscription or seal, it is indeed an authentic work of Shen Li in his early years from the perspective of brushwork, compositional characteristics and color. Moderator, this incident has caused heated discussions on the internet, not only because Shen Li is now called the top discussion, but also because this A Snow was unearthed in the tomb of Xie Qingjuan, a famous minister in the early years of the Huan dynasty. Professor, needless to say, this painting is indeed too well preserved, and the owner must have cherished it very much during his lifetime. Moderator, Xie Qingjuan has had ups and downs in his life, and he has become the chief assistant, but he has a bumpy marriage, and after divorcing Shen Lihe, it is said that he has never married in his life. Professor, there are very few records of his marital status in official history, but what is certain is that he did have no children in his life, and adopted a child from a side sect in his later years. Moderator, the love-hate relationship between this couple is still talked about today, and many people regret that if their marriage can last long, it will be a good story of harmony. Professor, then Shen Li will not have such a high degree of discussion. Shen Li has today's artistic height, not only because of the high-definition charm of his painting skills, but also because of his extraordinary intentions. It is also because her life has traveled all over the country, with valleys and clouds and waters flying, creating ink pastoral landscape painting. As a woman, she fills in the gap from another angle of history, showing a very leisurely and elegant and open-minded female image. In the later period, Shen Li believed in Buddhism. There was always Zen in the paintings, penetrating the creation, and getting the will of heaven. Her paintings were beyond reality, and countless literati and women in later generations sought ideal realms from her paintings, and everyone loved Shen Li, not only her paintings, but also her personality charm. Moderator, yes, if she and Xie Qingjuan stay together for a long time, she is just the wife of the chief assistant with an unknown surname in historical records, and there is no Shen Li in the world. However, there is also a saying in the industry that Ms. Shen Li loves to paint pear trees more than rendering landscapes, but there are fewer pear-related content in the later period. Can the paintings unearthed this time be verified? Professor, Shen Li does love to paint pears, mostly in the early days of marriage. The painting skills are still immature, full of sorrow, but the colors are fresh, and the artistic conception has a later charm. In the later period, Shen Li still loved to paint pears, but he was inconspicuous in a large number of landscape pastoral paintings in her later years. Shenli's niece compiled all the pairs she painted into a collection, and she inscribed them herself. Shenli has rich experience in her life, wonderful. She lived to the age of 80 in that era. It is rumored that her last painting before her death was also a pear. When her niece found it, the snow-white pear blossoms fell all over her body, and she finally fell asleep peacefully under the pear tree with a brush. Host: what words did Shenli inscribe in that compiled art book? Melancholy is a snow in the east railing, how clear is life. The professor smiled. The collection is called A Snow. End of full text.